1. MLS Aces Podcast. This is your host, Tom Sweezy. This is episode 325. Back again, Jason V. Vang. Jason, Western Conference. It took a toll on my mental. I'll be honest. That entire episode took a toll on the mental, but now we got to do it again for the East. How are you?
Yeah, I was like, when we get an hour in, I mean, we were just talking about it, but yeah, when we get an hour in, I'm going to be like, trying to keep my wits about me, but we're great. I think both of us have Eastern Conference teams. We kind of are a little bit more not knowledgeable, but like intimate with with this conference. So I don't know. Hopefully, we're gonna do well. I'm excited. I guess that's the only thing I can say. I'm already starting slow here. Okay.
We're also recording this a lot earlier in the day than we normally do. Not a lot. A few hours earlier. But yes, we are going to be touching on all 15 Eastern Conference teams today. Pretty much the only kind of news and notes that I feel like we should mention just super quickly is one, obviously the big announcement from USL about their plans to drop a USL First Division. We'll probably talk about it more on a different episode, Jason, because I want to get
when we don't have an hour and a half.
When we don't have to have to talk about every team in MLS. But pretty much, I talked about it on our Tuesday episode with John Morrissey, USL Tactics, however you know him. But John is one of the best, if not the best dude to follow surrounding all of USL. He knows it from top to bottom. And I had a great, I think it was like 30, 40-minute conversation with him discussing the interview that Paul McDonough had with Paul Tenorio, John's own takes and thoughts on it all and kind of what this all could mean. Great conversation. Go listen to that. But, Jason, the only thing that I feel like you and I need to discuss before we get into the Eastern Conference preview is obviously some moves surrounding Western Conference teams.
We're back talking about the West.
Yeah, we're back to the West. That we didn't get to touch on last week because they didn't happen until after our episode came out. So I'm going to quickly roll through these 5 big moves. I'm going to target or label them as, and then we can obviously discuss if anything kind of comes up with it. But 3 of the 5 moves did come from Los Angeles, well, came from LAFC specifically. LAFC has sold Kike Oliveira to Grêmio down in Brazil for a reported fee of $4.5 million from our friend Tom Bogert. And then in replacement, and I'm going to butcher his name, so I apologize, they signed Turkish winger Cengiz Ünder from Fenerbahce.
I think you probably nailed that, to be honest.
Thank
I was trying to figure out how to say that name, and then you said it, and I was like, that seems more right than any of the thoughts I had in my head.
I know the last name isn't Under. I know it's
that. I did know that.
But yes, so Under is coming over from Fenerbahce on a 6-month loan. Kind of feels like it's a stopgap until Griezmann can be acquired as a DP in the summer, so that's just, I'm not saying that's confirmed, I'm just saying that's what it feels like. And then LAFC also signed a U22 initiative left back in Artem Smalkov from the Ukraine First Division. Jason, any of these moves for LAFC really do anything for you, change anything in terms of what we talked about last week, anything like that?
I mean, I think we both had, I should have just looked back, but I know we both had LAFC finishing pretty high in the standings.
We both have them in the top 3. You have them in third, I have them in second.
I don't think it changes my opinion on that. Like, I still think this team's going to be good. I still think these moves, I think what I really want to do is go back in LAFC's history and see how much money they've made, because I know they've spent a lot of money, but it just feels like every move they make, they're just making millions off of it. And if there was I wish MLS had I guess this would be probably pretty hard to do over the course of the whole
an all-time sales chart.
Yeah, like all-time up and down sales. Like, I'm sure this team's in the red a little bit that they've lost money. Maybe not. But it feels like LAFC's got to be near the top. At least since they've entered the league, they've just been making so much money, and they did so again. And typically they spend the money pretty well. So I don't have a lot to say about the incoming players outside of the fact that I wouldn't be surprised if they were good signings and turn into more money for LAFC.
Look, I just quickly say losing Kike Oliveira, I think, is kind of big. because he obviously a talent. He started getting caps with the Uruguay national team, and I think last year started breaking out a little bit with LAFC, which is probably why a big Brazilian club is interested in him, right, and willing to spend almost $5 million on him. Obviously, the replacement of a Turkish international that has, I mean, he's not just like, oh, he has like 5 caps for Turkey. He has 51 caps for Turkey with 26 goal contributions. You know, like he's a full-fledged international that, if he's a 6-month replacement, he's a 6-month replacement. You have David Martinez there as well to help fill in.
Well, and they could keep him longer. I mean, if it really works. So.
Yeah, I mean, I guess if Griezmann isn't going to come to fruition, or if he's willing to maybe take like a TAM level deal for.
Is he a DP?
I think he's technically gonna probably be classified as a DP.
Oh.
So
I mean, I don't hate it. It could really work out for them.
Yeah, I mean, his profile is of a DP level player too. So there's also that. So I like the moves. I like a U22 initiative left back. You know, obviously they lost one of those earlier in the offseason with Omar Campos going to Cruz Azul. So it's good replacements for what the team lost is what I'll leave it at that. One of the other moves that we should quickly talk about is coming from LA as well, but the LA Galaxy, they signed U22 initiative striker Matheus Nascimento. He's a 20-year-old striker coming over on loan from Botafogo. Botafogo obviously won Copa Libertadores last year, and they won the Brazilian Serie A. He was part of that. This season, obviously, the Brazilian league is a little bit of a different, unique calendar. They've only played a handful of games this season, but he does have 1 goal and 1 assist in 5 games so far. But he almost has 100 games played at 20 years old. Obviously, Botafogo, big-time Brazilian club. Yeah. Seems like him.
Club World Cup.
I mean, yeah, right? Him and Christian Ramirez could be a pretty good 1-2 punch replacement for Joveljic being gone. Anything you want to say about that?
I mean, I would just agree. Honestly, I feel like we talked about the Christian Ramirez in the striker position a lot with the LA Galaxy section of the Western Conference previews. So I would just say, go listen to that maybe, and then take that into consideration, because we talked about how Christian Ramirez could be your striker, but how's it going to work over the full season? Do you want some type of replacement? This is the guy, right? This is the guy they brought in to fill that potential depth, potential for a breakout season. Who knows? Like you said, he's coming from a pretty big name club. He's got 100 games played almost. So
yeah. Fair enough. Leave it at that. The last move to quickly mention, and I'm kind of rushing through these for people just because we have to get to the East before.
Yeah, we're going to say this is an Eastern Conference pod, and then we just spent the first 10 minutes talking about the Western Conference.
We're not at 10 minutes yet. My last move, Colorado Rapids have acquired central midfielder Josh Atencio from the Seattle Sounders for $1.3 million in GAM. Atencio will remain as a U22 initiative player with the Rapids, and the Sounders have a sell-on percentage, if he gets sold outside of Major League Soccer, etc. I'll just quickly say about this, feels like Atencio was just one too many central midfield pieces there. Obviously, the club has Roldan, Joao Paulo, Obed Vargas, Danny Leyva, right? Like the club has a lot in that central midfield. It just seems like young talent, proven talent. He can get a bunch of money inside of MLS. Let's go get it type of deal. And we have the depth already on this team to replace him. So that's just kind of what it felt like to me.
I mean, I think this is more important to talk about in the concept of Colorado than it is for Seattle, just because, like you said, it's sort of like they had these embarrassment of riches or whatever in Seattle in the midfield. But for Colorado, I think it is a pretty good move. It adds depth for them. It adds, a known MLS guy. So I like that.
I think it adds starting quality too. I'm a big Josh Atencio guy. I think he could be a starting midfielder next to Cole Bassett, Connor Ronan, whoever it could be. Or if he's the third guy of that group of 3, that's not bad.
I mean, it totally makes me more confident in Colorado doing well next year or this year.
I think I'm going to say, I haven't said this on the podcast. Obviously, CONCACAF Champions Cup's going on. We'll touch on some of those results probably as we preview the East, but I think the Rapids could be a sneaky MLS team to make the semifinals. All I'm saying is I'm going to go Rapids. I'm high on them right now.
Did they win? I'm pretty sure they did win.
They did win. 2-1 win over LAFC. It wasn't Colorado. Now they have to go get the job done on the road, but I'm just saying. Next week, the Rapids get smoked 7-0 at on the road, and I'm wrong, but it's fine. All right, Jason, let's go. Eastern Conference preview. We're going to do it the same way we did it on last week's episode with the West. We're going to go results backwards from the 2024 season. Obviously, New York Red Bulls made MLS Cup. So sad that they lost. But Sandro Schwarz entering his second season as manager of the New York Red Bulls. Some players out on the offseason. Dante Van Zier going back to Europe. John Tolkien getting sold to the Bundesliga. Elias Manuel, Andres Reyes, all going within MLS. Obviously, the legend of Ryan Miera retiring, longtime backup goalkeeper for the New York Red Bulls. Some players on the in. Tim Parker, Raheem Edwards, Marcelo Morales, Alexander Hack, Eric Maxime Choupo-Moting, Victor Bogash, like a ton of talents outside of also re-signing the likes of a Carlos Coronel and whatnot. Jason, this team, I feel like maybe got better from their MLS Cup, final team last year. Like, explain to me, when you look at this team, like, what stands out to you for how they improved, or if you think they improved heading into 2025?
I do think this team got better. It's kind of funny because I don't feel like I placed them better, but I do think they did get better. I think actually a decent amount of teams in the East got better, which I guess.
I think that's probably the reason why.
Yeah, which is probably the reason why I'm not as super excited about this team. But I think the biggest thing for this team is what they kind of unlocked in the playoffs last year, which is Forsberg and using him in this number 10 role, basically unlocking their whole team, right? I think a lot of the additions are interesting to me because you have, 4 guys who are 29 or older that you're bringing in, which is, I don't think it's a bad thing at all, but I think it's actually a good thing. You're adding some solid players who have a lot of minutes, be that in MLS or outside of MLS, like in Choupo-Moting, who's played almost 450 games with top tier clubs in the world.
And all of it,
And I think that, like, I talked about that when they brought him in. I think that's a good move. I'm not really that upset they're losing Dante Van Zier when you bring in Choupo-Moting. I think that's an upgrade in many ways. But I like the team. I'm curious to see how a full season goes. The average age of this team definitely went up, right? I mean,
which isn't a bad thing, to the point that you were saying of, like, the Red Bulls signed older players. The Red Bulls don't normally sign older players.
Well, and it's not like these players are that old. Like 29, like outside of Choupo-Moting is 35. Like, these guys are 29 to 31, I guess, in the 4 that I'm talking about. That they brought in, which is sort of prime still. Like, I think they're bringing in pretty smart. Like, I think these are smart offseason moves for them. And a team that was almost won, honestly, MLS Cup last season. Getting better is impressive. Like, I think at the end of the day, you take a team that, sure, did some of those, the way the standings or the bracket kind of fell, helped them out a little bit, sure, but you have to get lucky at sometimes to win. And they also beat top clubs. So I wouldn't put them – I wouldn't say like it was some crazy outlier that got them to the MLS Cup. I think they're clearly good. And I think, again, just to reiterate, Emil Forsberg is Emil Forsberg. They still have Carlos Coronel, who can carry at times, as we've seen.
Yes.
I think their defense got better with bringing in Tim Parker and Alexander Hack. I think both of them can provide not only good minutes, but very experienced minutes. So
I think there's a few pieces there that I just want to quickly touch on. One, Sandro Schwarz, I think, is a very good manager, and he proved that in 2024. I think 2025, if he sticks with that 3-5-1-2 formation that rode them in the playoffs, the MLS Cup, and, upset the Columbus Crew, upset, I guess
NYCFC.
Everything was an upset because they were one of the lower ranked teams, but NYCFC, Orlando, and then obviously, falling short to the Galaxy. I think it unlocked a new way for this team to be dominant. I also think it unlocked Emil Forsberg to be kind of just a free roaming, I'm going to do everything type of deal. Forsberg obviously was injured for a majority of 2024, but when he was on the field, the goals for against and goals against and the results and everything just speak for themselves.
Yeah, like on-off numbers, like in the NBA, his would be crazy.
I spoke with Mark Fishkin on last week's interview episode, and obviously Mark, host of the Seeing Red, one of the hosts of the Seeing Red podcast, does a lot of coverage around the New York Red Bulls, and he was just like, Emil Forsberg, if he's healthy, will have this team playing at a different level, and I can't disagree. They have one of the best defenses in the league. I think they have Emil Forsberg, who's a potential MVP candidate. Lewis Morgan, who's not on a DP deal, but I think he's a DP level talent. And I think if any of the youngsters that you're talking about on this roster, Julian Hall, Serge Goma, even if it's an Adri Mehmeti, Victor Bogash that they brought in this offseason, like if it's any of these guys, or two of them or whatever, elevate to the next level, the Red Bulls are looking at
which they have a history of doing, basically.
Right?
Yeah.
This team is elevating to a top 3 team in the Eastern Conference, but they need that young talent to do it. Every MLS club does, but they're on the verge of it, so I'm very excited. Not as a New York City FC fan, but I'm excited as an MLS fan to see what this team what the heights that they can hit. I guess I'll
just to play devil's advocate or whatever, right?
Yeah.
To both of what I've been saying and what you just said. I wonder how much like that success in the playoffs came because of Forsberg being out for so long, right? Like there's a chance that with a whole season now, teams start to realize this is how, like, it happened so fast. He came back. They kind of switched formations. They kind of figured that all out so fast, and it really, really was successful.
Yeah.
But I'm curious now, a whole offseason later, I don't think it, like, and I'm not saying it was a surprise to teams that it kind of opened up like that, but maybe that timing just hit perfectly that I'm curious, will it be as successful for the whole season and maybe into the playoffs this year as it was last year? You know what I mean? Like how much of it was a perfect time and how much of it was like, this is really, because I do think it really transformed this team's like level, went from, sneaking into the playoffs basically, or one of those lower point total playoff teams, to a very competitive team beating Columbus, beating all those teams. But
I agree. I think timing is a big part of everything in this world, as if I want to get a little bit high level. But I think I agree. Maybe the return of Forsberg after being out, and he's as fully fit as he's going to be when everyone's a season-worn wear and tear on their legs, maybe that's also a piece of it too. I think even if it's the case, right, where it's like, okay, now teams know what to expect and they're going to centrally focus their defense on Emil Forsberg, then the question is even more, who else steps up? Is it Choupo-Moting? Is it Lewis Morgan? Is it one of these other young talents? Who else can now, if Forsberg's drawing attention over here, who can score the goal over here, or who can put in that final pass over here? And I think that's just the fun story about this Red Bulls team in 2025. So yeah, I don't want to drag on too long, but let's move forward. The next team, the team that the Red Bulls faced in the Eastern Conference Final, Orlando City. We have Oscar Pareja coming in for his 5th season as manager of this club. Some key players on the out, not a ton, but enough, I think, in quality that it's probably more of a conversation. But Facundo Torres, obviously the big sale for him to Palmeiras, Nico Ladero, Michael Halliday, Mason Stajduhar, and a few other names sprinkled in there. Some players on the in, Edward Atuesta, Marco Pasalic, Nicolas Rodriguez, Kyle Smith being re-signed, Pedro Gaese being re-signed, same with Cesar Araujo, and a few other depth pieces on this team. Jason, this Orlando City team was maybe the most difficult team in both conferences
100%
to place, because where I really like the additions of an Edward Atuesta and a Pasalic, I think those two are going to be very top players in this league. You also lost Facundo Torres, who's a guy who dragged this team into a trophy in their MLS history. You lost a leadership of a Nico Ladero. And this team, to me, was so on the cusp of, are they great or are they good last year? And I'm still feeling like, okay, now these guys have to step up even more for them to be great. So I think they're good, but I don't know. what are your thoughts around
I mean, I think if you look at the playoffs last year, there was a moment where it was like, this team's going to MLS Cup the way these cards are falling. Obviously, that didn't happen. And like you're saying, the Facundo Torres being gone, it's really hard to look at this team and try and understand where they're going to end up, because you're losing a guy who's been there and been producing for that team as their main production for so long. I mean, last season alone, he had 20 goals and 7 assists. So, like, to me, I agree. It is really difficult. I think Oscar Pareja is a good coach. I know sometimes that opinion of him goes up and down, it feels like, more than most coaches in the league.
He's a good coach. he just hasn't won it all, you know? Like, and I think that's the thing that is held against him, is he hasn't won an MLS Cup, but in the history of Major League Soccer, he is one of the best coaches this league has seen.
Yeah, I mean, 100%. And I think this team, based on that and based on Atuesta coming in, like you mentioned, Pasalic, they're bringing in players with experience, with kind of solid, great track records, whether that is in MLS or elsewhere. I think that's positive. I guess I'm looking like, could Shaq Muhammad maybe take a step up? I don't know. Like this team is tough to me to try and figure out what they're going to do or how they're going to play this season, because it is a huge difference. I mean, Duncan McGuire's still there. He was on the plane basically 2 years ago. So can he have a great season again?
The thing that I'll say that stands out to me initially when I was like going through this, right, is there's not a lot of depth in the midfield, but this team's rocking like 5 strikers, right? Like, probably if you're considering like MLS level strikers, 4, right? Or 3 when you talk about Ramiro Enrique, Duncan McGuire, and Luis Muriel. Is Muriel going to be a dude who's, you know, playing like underneath as a second striker, which we saw him a little bit last year? Is he going to bump out wide? We
False
saw
nine
a little bit
last year too.
You know, is Ramiro Enrique or Duncan McGuire going to step up as the starting level striker in replacement of that? Is David Bracalo, who they brought in last year, right, who I think they spent a good amount of money at center back, is he going to take over that starting role over Rodrigo Schlegel? Like, there is just a lot of questions, and I think this team needs to figure out the front line a little bit, and then this team needs to figure out, okay, what youth players are going to step up? Is it Alex Freeman? Is it Colin Gusky? Is it Shaq Muhammad, like you mentioned, right? Like a kid coming out of college like 2 years ago now. So just a lot of questions, and there's no denying the talent on this roster. It's just, how does it all work? And I have to give some faith to Oscar Pareja that he will figure it out, but I don't have. I'm starting to have the thoughts creep in.
I mean, I think like you could put this team in a couple different spots in the end of season standing prediction and probably be completely justified in doing so. Also, not to mention, Pedro Gaese is still there, still, in my opinion, a top-tier goalkeeper. Or, you know, can be at that level. So you never know. Like, when you have the pieces, I think this team has good pieces. It's just, we don't know how it's going to look because of I think the Facundo Torres loss is just, like, hovering over the team now, because it's, or not necessarily hovering over them at themselves, but hovering over us as, like, trying to figure out what this team is going to do.
Look, and I mean, I slightly disagree, because I really like Marko Pasalic. He's a Croatian international. He's super young. I think a lot of people are saying positive things. Yes, his goals and assists don't scream like Facundo Torres replacement. I just have more. But I think his game will transition nicely into MLS. I have more questions of just like, You have a DP spot being used on Luis Muriel. You have Ramiro Enrique on a U22 initiative spot. Duncan McGuire, who, like you mentioned, was on a plane to Blackburn 2 years ago. He's probably going to expect minutes. Like, you have a lot of money invested in a front line and who's going to play where and where everyone's going to get minutes. When you're rocking a midfield of Martin Ojeda, Edward Atuesta, Cesar Araujo, and then kind of just hoping maybe some youngsters step up. Like, it's
the Austin of the East.
It could be. I mean, honestly, it could be. But then you also have Robin Janssen, who's been a top-of-the-line center back in MLS for years. So I don't know. I like this team. This is far from a bad team. I don't know is what I'm going to leave it at for me. But if you have anything else,
we're going from one I don't know team to the next. So
I know. This team I know. Okay. New York City FC coming in with Pascal Janssen, maybe the biggest addition of the offseason as new manager of the club. Some key players out this offseason. James Sands on loan to St. Pauli, and he obviously has a pretty bad injury right now, so wishing all my love to James Sands. Jovan Mijatovic getting loaned to the Belgian First Division. Christian McFarland getting sold to Man City. And then, obviously, I think longtime guys who were out on loan in Thiago Andrade and Nicolas Acevedo, them getting their final official goodbyes to the team. The ins, not really a ton. That's why I said Pascal Janssen, probably the biggest in for this team. The team did re-sign Maxi Morales at the good old age of 38. Greg Ranjitsingh is coming in as a third goalkeeper on this roster. A few homegrown signings, but one that I do just want to quickly highlight is Prince Amponsa, who is coming out of Wake Forest. He is a homegrown signing, though. He is technically a center back if you look at his transfer marks or anything like that. He played a bunch of center back in college, but he has played left back, and from what I'm hearing and reading and seeing, he'll probably be the primary left back, primary left back backup in replacement for Christian McFarland behind Kevin O'Toole. So some people were questioning the left back depth. Just throwing out there, Prince Amponsa. I like his game a lot. I think he'll be pretty good at the MLS level, to be perfectly honest. But this is a team that was just an absolute roller coaster of emotions in 2024, either looking like the best team in MLS or you're looking like the absolute worst, losing and dropping points everywhere. Santi Rodriguez is also a big question mark. Is he going to Botafogo for the $17 million reported fee that is out there online on social media that Tom Bogert's also confirmed as well? If he does, who's starting at the 10? Is it 38-year-old Maxi Morales? Does Hannes Wolf come into the middle and play a little 10 that we saw last year? Maybe I do have more questions than answers here, because there's a lot of talent gone when you look at McFarland, when you look at Sands, when you look at Mijatovic, and now it's going to require, I think, a young talent core that was brought in over the last 18 months. I think Matt Doyle said that $25 million was spent by New York City FC between the summer of 2023 and the winter of 2024, right? Like, those are guys like Augustino Ojeda, Julian Fernandez. Like, those guys now need to elevate their game. They need to be the starters. They need to be the stars and come through with the investment that this New York City front office put into them. So the additions weren't this offseason. The additions were in the last year and a half on young talents that Nick Cushing didn't really develop, and now Pascal Janssen's in, and we'll see what he can develop, is my big takeaway on New York City. I don't know if you anything you want to add, but I know you wanted me to take over. New York
Hey, man, that was great. Like, I personally, when I look at this team, I'm like, I don't know which way they're trying to go. I guess, I mean, it's
a point, development club, 100% development club.
That's and to your point, like, them spending money, it doesn't, them not bringing in a bunch of players this window doesn't necessarily mean they aren't invested in this season, right? Yeah. And I think that's a good point. Also, like, these players need to take a step up, because I don't feel like the roster is, I mean, I don't know. I just don't think they're that strong. And I think injuries are going to be a problem if they end up happening. Also, not to mention they still play in a baseball stadium, which seems to be like a huge advantage.
How does everyone keeps on using that against New York City when we?
Hey, I'm using it as a good thing, dude.
We're dropping a soccer-specific stadium in the middle of Queens. Okay, like it's coming.
I saw it being built actually while I was on a plane. Anyway, I'm using it as an advantage, though. I think they do pretty well at that stadium.
Look, if I can just give my super quick, hyper excited way that I think New York City finishes top 4 in the Eastern Conference is Augustino Heyde and Julian Fernandez, who, again, a lot of money was spent on, just come into their own, and they're star wingers. They're the Tati Castellanos level development and explosion that we saw a few seasons ago. Alonso Martinez is still having the second highest XG in all of MLS behind Lionel Messi. That was last year, folks, so pay attention to that. I believe in Alonso Martinez at the 9. Malachi Jones returns from his long-term injury when he turns back into the stud that he was before injury last year. Keaton Parks is still a top-of-the-line central midfielder in MLS. Matt Freese is still arguably the best goalkeeper in all of MLS. Tavon Gray is still arguably one of the best right-backs in MLS. And the rest of the team just kind of takes a step forward behind those 3 and the youth development. And I think this team has the talent to be top 4 in the East. Now, the pessimistic in me, will it happen? Probably not. So that's where I'm at. But that's my my New York City take there, Jason.
Yeah, moving on.
Okay, moving on. Atlanta United, the team that grabbed all of our hearts with the playoff run last year, and I'm sure they won't be hated this year because of all the money spent and the additions. Atlanta United, Ronnie Dyla, former New York City FC manager, coming in his first season for the club. Some players on the out. Dax McCarty retired. Franco Ibarra, Santiago Sosa gone. Daniel Rios gone from his loan last year. Some players on the in, just a few kind of big names, right? Miguel Almiron back in Atlanta United. Emmanuel Latte-Loff, the MLS transfer record signing coming in. Mateus Click coming in from DC United. The club brought back Jamal Tiare, Ronald Hernandez, Brad Guzan, and kind of re-signing some key depth pieces there. Jason, Atlanta United, I mean, it's about every other year now where we just say Atlanta spent so much money. They're going to be so good. It's going to be so exciting, so fun to watch. The sad thing is I truly believe it about this year, though. I think this team's going to be so much fun to watch.
Yeah, I mean, I think in the context of this team, you have to mention kind of like the Saba moves, the Moranchik, there's one more, right? Xande Silva moves, basically, that were all from mid-last season that they clearly hit on, which I think during the season, I was saying, these are good moves, but they're not for this year. They ended up working out really well for that year. And now you just reloaded to an extreme level I've never seen, right? Like we're talking about a team who lost Almada and Giacomakis a year ago, or a little less than a year ago, probably at this point, which was like, this is a throwaway season, right? And then they got to the semifinal of MLS Cup. So it's not like, or no, not the semifinal, the quarterfinal. But regardless, they were flying in that, and they then brought in, like you said, Latte-Loff and Miguel Almiron, who were we know Almiron's resume. We know this guy's absolutely incredible and has dominated MLS in his career.
Yeah.
I think this team just simply got even better than where they were at. And I think a lot of those signings that I mentioned from last season, like Saba and Moranchik and Silva, they're just potentially going to take another step. They're now going to be playing with Miguel Almiron and Latte-Loff in the center. Those are around the players that they brought in last season. They're just adding the biggest signing, like you said, in MLS history as a striker, and Almiron, who knows the team, knows the city, knows everything about MLS, and has one of the best resumes you could have in MLS itself. So I don't know. I'm high on this team. I think the only question I'd have, I guess, is Brad Guzan. But Josh Cohen's a serviceable backup, and Brad Guzan, goalies sometimes can play into their 40s, but and he had a very good playoffs. I just another season of Brad Guzan. It was not on my bingo card in 2025.
No. Look, I think he honestly earned himself one more year after the playoff run last year.
And I like their defensive back line. Like everywhere you look in this team, whether it's mainly the starting line, but even some of the backups, like there are very serviceable quality players there. It's not like there's a huge gaping hole, and that's why it's like I guess the hole would be Brad Guzan if he ends up really feeling the age at some point, but maybe not, and that's kind of like grasping at straws because we just saw him. Gosh, it's crazy. It's only like 3 months ago playing, but
yeah, we didn't see him that long ago balling out and making unbelievable key saves to upset Inter Miami, right?
Yeah.
You completely covered that attack well, so I'm not going to touch it. I agree with 90% of what you said. When I talk about the rest of the team here, when I talk about that lower midfield block, Bartos, Leash, right? Like coming into year one, Poland international, he had his good moments. I think he had some down moments. I think year two, he'll be a little bit more comfortable and he'll take a step up. Mateus Klick is pretty much a DP on loan from DC United, and that's unbelievable that they added another one, Tristan Mayumba, there as well. Pedro Amador, the tear, and I talked about it down the stretch last year, every single episode. The tear that this dude was on, getting up the field and putting in a serviceable cross into whoever it was finishing it at that time, because Atlanta was just running off whoever is stepping up. We'll throw Brad Guzan at striker if that's what we need. They'll do it, and that's like Pedro Amador was just servicing everybody, and it was unbelievable. And I think if you have him, if Brooks Lennon can come back healthy from his injury, again, not too long ago in the playoffs, right? Stian Gregerson, again, kind of similar to Sleesh to me. If he can get acclimated with 1 full year down in MLS and he can take a step forward. And then if it's Derek Williams or it's Luis Abram or it's one of the homegrown center backs there, and everyone kind of maybe just vibes out with how that attack's going and maybe a little bit of less pressure based off, less pressure on the defense based off how much I think this attack is going to get, focused on. I think this team is going to be very good. Now, again, I'll just finish up by saying this team, Atlanta United, spends a bunch of money like every other year. And we haven't seen it since the Tata Martino, Josef, Miguel Almiron days. Miguel Almiron's back. Chris Henderson is in, and this front office is a front office that should be trusted in MLS circles. So I will give them the benefit of the doubt and say, I think I'm excited about Atlanta United in 2025.
I mean, when you look at like how we described that team, we basically mentioned every single player in the lineup, and that is just a testament to where this team's at, right? Like it's almost like crazy that I kind of went for however long. It didn't even mention Mateus Klick. Like they just got like
DP in MLS.
Gifted basically. I don't know how that worked out.
Yeah. All right, let's talk about another team that we'll probably mention every player on. Inter Miami. So Inter Miami, the team that was upset by Atlanta United last year, has Javier Mascherano coming in as his first season as manager. Some key players on the out, and there was a bunch because if you're Inter Miami, you got to balance the book somehow. Facundo Farias, gone. Emerson Rodriguez, gone. Leonardo Campagna, gone. CJ Dos Santos, Diego Gomez, Nicolas Freire, Matty Rojas, Franco Negri, Sergi Christoph, all gone from this team. So what does Inter Miami and Lionel Messi do? They just bring in a bunch of South American internationals who are playing overseas pretty much. Maxi Falcon in at center back, Telesco Segovia in the central midfield, Gonzalo Lujan, who can play center back and right back, in. Oscar Ustari re-signed, Tadio Allende signed from Celta Vigo, Fafa Pico coming back into his hometown of Inter Miami, re-signing Marcelo Weigand, re-signing Ian Frey, Yannick Bright, Jordi Alba, and Luis Suarez as well. Just a few names to throw in there. Jason, Inter Miami. I mean, they're going to be the headline. They're going to be the storyline every single week in Major League Soccer. Is it just, let's just roll it back and hopefully this retooled core can just go out and win CONCACAF Champions League or MLS Cup in 2025?
I mean, yeah, like I guess you have Messi still. So as long as you have Messi, you're contending for a trophy every single year. Whether you're retooling the way they did it, like I think sure you have to make some of those moves, like you said, balance out some of the other moves. Send some people away, make some money. You know, it's not like they didn't make money. I don't know. No. This is another team I'd love to see their
books.
Yeah, their spend. I don't know what you would even call it, like net spend over the course of the years.
Net, yeah.
Like I think that would be super interesting because it's another team who spends a lot, and it's I don't know, like this team as long as they have Messi, as long as they have Busquets, Alba, Luis Suarez, like at this point I'm done doubting the age. I'm done doubting these guys because it doesn't matter. Like
because it works.
And when they're in, it's so good. Like it is such a strong team that it's so difficult to defend. And it's almost one of those things where if Messi's playing the game, he's so good. And obviously we all know this, right? We've seen it for decades, but it truly elevates every single player on the roster. Like every single player gets this huge boost. Like Benjamin Kremovsky on FC Dallas or something isn't Benjamin Kremovsky on Inter Miami. And that's no hate towards him as a player. I think he's a very good player, but it's one of those things that it's like you get into a team with Messi, and whether it's a mental thing or just actual you get better, it's probably some type of both, but it's truly like a huge boost. And I think as long as this team has Messi in the lineup, it doesn't like there's just no way they don't win a trophy, I guess, this year.
I mean, look at the result last night. It was Inter Miami versus Sporting Kansas City in CONCACAF Champions Cup. It's negative 17 degrees in Kansas City. And what's the difference maker in that matchup? It's Sergio Busquets putting in a beautiful ball to Lionel Messi, who creates a moment of magic and finds the back of the net. And that's what this team is going to be. The question mark for me isn't if Suarez and Messi are going to factor into a bunch of goals, or if Busquets, Redondo, Kremovsky, if those guys aren't going to be key central midfield spots, or even the new guys in the attack, right? Like a Segovia and Allende, like even Fafa Picault, right? Like I'm not even worried about those pieces. I'm worried about, does this team elevate across the back line? They made some moves in a Lujan, in a Maxi Falcon to come in. Now, can they, along with maybe Toto Alvilas, taking a step forward as a very young center back, and we saw good moments, but we also saw bad moments from him last year, can they all take a step forward and elevate Inter Miami into real contenders for the two biggest titles in this region, which for me is CONCACAF Champions Cup and MLS Cup? You know, they win Leagues Cup, great, but is it going to feel the same way as CONCACAF Champions Cup? No, it's not, and that's just my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, if any of the defensive line gets even 1% better, I think you have your answer, right? Like, as long as they don't get worse, it doesn't matter, because this team scored 79 goals last season. You know what? That amazing LA Galaxy attack scored 69 goals. There's 10 goal difference between an attack that we were raving about for the entire year, saying how literally every single player in that attack, Paintsel, Peck, Joveljic, like all of them were incredible. They scored 69 goals last year, and Miami was 10 more, like, I don't know. They're going to score. They're going to score again, and they're going to score a lot. They're going to be at the top of the goals probably for another season, as long as health stays the same. And I think, I don't know, maybe that's the only downside. That's the hole in this team, is health. But it's sort of been that for the whole time, right? The last 2 years. So and they won a trophy in both of those seasons. And like you said, maybe the trophies, that they're aspiring to are Champions Cup and MLS Cup.
I just think it needs to be different trophies for me to
I mean, if they go and win another supporter shield, like I personally see that as a pretty prestigious trophy. While I agree MLS Cup and definitely CONCACAF Champions Cup are bigger trophies, if we want to get into those debates anymore. But
no, I'm not denying the supporter shield end the record-breaking season. Like, that was, to me, like, that's step one. Okay.
Oh, we're getting into this again.
No,
I'm just kidding.
just
I'm just
saying,
kidding.
in the larger picture, I think, cool. Messi was in half a season. You guys won Leagues Cup. Probably wasn't expected. First full year of Messi, you win the Supporter Shield. You break a single season points record. That's probably expected. Yeah. Now in season 2.5, whatever you want to call it, of this experiment, I think you need to go win either your league's title or you need to go win a continental competition. And again, I value Champions Cup over Leagues Cup. That's just what it is. One gets you into the Club World Cup, one doesn't. So that is.
Oh, I mean, I don't think anyone would argue with Champions Cup being more prestigious than Leagues Cup.
Yes.
To be fair, I think you are not alone in that one.
We are going to talk a lot more Inter Miami this season, I'm sure. So let's keep it moving and let's go to the Columbus Crew, where we have Wilfried Nancy entering his third season as manager of the club. Some pretty big outs on the offseason. Christian Ramirez, gone. Cucho Hernandez, gone, sold to Real Betis. Marino Heinstroza, gone, sold back down to Colombia. Alexandre Matan, gone. Yaya Boa, gone, right? Not maybe as much in as probably people would be hoping. I think there was a lot of re-signed players, and Nico Hagen, Patrick Schulte, AZ Jackson, Jason Russell-Rowe, Evan Bush. And then the team also made kind of, I guess, one outfield signing of Lassi Lapalainen via free agency, who Lapalainen did play under Nancy up in Montreal and had his best year in MLS at that point. So that's a thing to talk about. But Jason, I mean, Columbus got worse. There's no doubt in my brain that Columbus got worse. But do you have enough faith in Nancy that his system and Wilfried Nancy being Wilfried Nancy can keep this team afloat?
Yes. Like, I have faith in Wilfried Nancy that, like, afloat, I guess, what's your definition of that, right? Like, if you want this team to get a home playoff game? Yeah,
that's what I'm saying.
I think that's what they're fighting for with this roster, right? I don't think it's the Sharpie this team into top 4, whether that's even almost at top 2 at one point, or top 3, I guess. I don't know.
Going into last year, Columbus was the only team that I was like is going to give Inter Miami a run for their money. And if Columbus didn't play in 4 competitions last year, I think they would have given Inter Miami a run for their money in MLS.
For Supporter Shield, you mean?
Yeah, sorry. For Supporter.
Yeah. I mean, this team scored 72 goals last year. That they were the next closest, right? But the tough part is, like, you lose, and it's the thing that is on the top of mind is Cucho Hernandez, right? Like, that's almost 40 goal contributions in a season they scored 72. That's more than 50% of the goals that were scored had something to do with Cucho. I think that alone is the reason this team got worse. I think Christian Ramirez out also makes them worse. I like Jason Russell-Rowe. I don't know if he's ready to be.
Can I give a quick JRR hot take?
Yeah, dude. I mean, I really like him. I don't know.
I think with what we saw in flashes, and I'm gonna keep calling him J-double-R. Oh, I like that better. I'm gonna call him J-double-R.
I just call him Jason. It's a great name.
I think he is going to be like a 15-plus goal scorer in 2025. I think it's just
he has to be.
I think he has to be one if Columbus is going to be good. But I just think with the way Nancy again tactically plays, you still have Diego Rossi there. You have Dylan Shambost and AZ Jackson, who I like a lot. I think both of them are very good players. And with the way that those wingbacks get up, I think Jason Russell-Rowe is going to get fed the ball a ton.
Are you concerned there's no depth for him?
I mean, no, right? Like, Diego Rossi would get pushed up the field probably, and other, like, the thing about Columbus is, like, I don't know if there's ever not depth, because everyone's just so tactically, we're going to shift around, and that's just what Wilfried Nancy does. No one has, like, a position almost.
He also gets so much out of these guys. Yeah. Like, you have, I don't know, like the Yaya Boa move leaving would concern me if I wasn't so confident in the rest of the wingbacks, right?
If it wasn't DeJuan Jones and Max Arfston sitting there, and Max Arfston
And you have Mo Farsi on the right and Andres Herrera. Like, it's not like this team is lacking quality players, which is why, again, they're going to be good. It's just how good, right? And it's the point of, I don't know if afloat is the best word for it. I kind of disagree because I think this team is still a top team in the East. I just think they're no longer 1 or 2. They're now maybe 4 or 5 or 3.
I guess that's maybe my thing is like maybe saying stay afloat's not correct, but I think this team went from okay, are you 1 or 2 in the East to now I think you're in that 4 to 6 conversation.
But I still think this team is one of those teams that could, coming into the playoffs of this season, could they be a team that I don't want to play? 100%. Yeah. I fully don't want to play this team if I'm in the playoffs, regardless. And is there another move in them? Is there another type of Cucho Hernandez out there that they're going to get, right? It's not like this team didn't do it before with Cucho,
that's
right?
What I was going to say is, right, like if you look at the roster construction, you still have a DP spot open, and if you go with the 3-and-3 roster creation, 3 U22 spots that you can bring in, right? Like obviously it's still a salary cap league and whatnot, but you have the flexibility here to bring in a ton more talent, and I'm sure that this front office and Issa Tall are going to try to do that.
They know what they're like at this point. It's another one of those clubs where you can't doubt them, right? No. Like I like the roster. I think the losses potentially do hurt quite a bit, but it's not one where I'm going, well, I don't know what they're going to look like. You know, it's not a bunch of losses on a team like Philly or something where I'm like, whoa, this is kind of bad versus like on this team, I have faith it's going to work out. And I also think, like you said, what's going on in the summer, right? Is that when that's the time where you hire those game changers or sign?
I mean, you're hiring them, you're paying them.
Right.
But no, I agree. I think this is a team that if they just kind of play Columbus Crew ball until the summer, and then you bring in that Cucho Hernandez replacement, or if Jason Russell Rose balling out and you see it, you need that replacement somewhere else at the DP level, sure, like cool. But let's keep it moving. Let's go to the other side of Ohio, and let's go to FC Cincinnati, where Pat Noonan's coming in as his 4th season as manager. By the way, that's the only manager tenure that has surprised me so far. That Pat Noonan's been there for 4 years, very good. And he's been around for almost half a decade, which is not common right now in Major League Soccer. But some players on the out. Obviously, Lucho Acosta, the biggest one. But behind him, you have Chidozie Awaziam, Ian Murphy, Emil Assad, Kevin Kelsey, Nicholas Giacchini, Kip Keller, and a few other names there. And obviously, Alvaro Barreal going on loan again down to Brazil. On the in, Kevin Denke, he was the MLS record transfer signing before Emmanuel Latelaf came in. Re-signing Obi Nwodo, re-signing Luca Orejana, or I guess officially signing Luca Orejana. Sergio Santos re-signed. Miles Robinson re-signed. Same with Nick Hagland. This team also brought in Taha Nunga, Gilberto Flores, a U22 level center back, Lucas Engel on loan from Middlesbrough, and then, just some MVP finalist in Evander over from Portland. So, and we haven't talked about that. That's a $12 million fee that they paid via the inter MLS sale market or whatever the fuck we're calling it at this point. But Jason,
it is crazy that Lucho left for 5 and they bought Evander for 12.
I mean, there's about a 5.
I do think I mentioned that to you in text message maybe where it was like $6 million difference or. That's 7. I don't know. Whatever. Math
for a 5-year age difference, I can see it. Lucho's approaching 31.
That's over $1 million per age.
I'm just saying. Maybe that's what it is nowadays, But I think the biggest thing to talk about here, right, is Lucho out, Evander in. Is that going to be the replacement to keep Cincinnati? And I'm going to go with, again, a top at the Eastern Conference. I think, yes, you saw it in Champions Cup last night. Evander comes in off the bench, gets his debut, goal and an assist. And it was a beautiful goal, by the way. Kevin Denke also getting his debut goal as well for the club in Champions Cup. Do you think this team has done enough in terms of, I think getting the replacements needed at left wing back with Evander in the attacking midfield and upgrading at striker to be back in the top of the Eastern Conference conversation in 2025.
Yeah, I do. I mean, I think like just that switch is 15 goal scorer going out, 15 goal scorer coming in, right? Like 19 assists going out, 18 assists coming in almost 10 less games. So like I don't know if you want to compare Evander to Lucho in terms of talent and in terms of impact. I don't know. I don't
they're
think
different
it really
players, but they're
both very, very good. And also I think Evander was playing for a worse team when he put up those numbers, right?
Yeah.
Well, actually, that's not a hot take. It straight up was a worse team.
Portland was a worse team than Cincinnati in 2024.
Also, Cincinnati is going to get Matt Miazga back at some point this season. They still have Miles Robinson. They still have Elvis Powell, Nick Hagelin, Teenage Shadebe, Roman Celentano, DeAndre Yedlin. Like, you can just go on and on. This is a team that kind of started with that build in the defense, in that exceptional defense. Exceptional defense. Obi Noboto is still there. Like, I don't even need to talk about the Evander, Kevin Denke, Luca Orellano, Kubo, Corey Bear. Like, that core in the attack, I really like. I think the Kevin Denke bringing in a great number 9 is what they kind of lacked.
They needed that. If they had Kevin Denke last year, Cincinnati would.
Yeah, they probably win a trophy, if not more than one. So I think like they have addressed the holes. The defense is going to be healthier. Like, it literally can't get worse, right?
Don't say that.
But knock on wood, Cincinnati fans. I truly think the defense is still so strong. Even if they have injuries, they're able to sustain them. It's not like this team was bad defensively last year. They were still a pretty top half defensive team with losing an MLS Defensive Player of the Year for basically the whole season, with Miles Robinson in and out of the lineup due to USA commitments and stuff. Like, both of those guys could be Defensive Player of the Year type level this season, and we're talking about a team that's going to have one of the best defensive units in the league. And I think that's kind of where I like, even if I don't know, like I get like the move of Lucho out was my biggest concern for the last month or so.
I think the concern real quick though.
Yeah, I mean, they answered it immediately. They didn't let Lucho leave before bringing in it. Like, well, I guess not timeline wise, but you get what I mean. Like, they didn't let him leave without having that hole filled. And I think again, the Kevin Denke signing is the cap of it all. This is the guy they need. They need a guy who can go out there and score in bunches, and Evander hopefully can form a pretty good relationship with him quickly. Like you said, they've already looked good in Champions Cup, so we'll see. I do think this team, though, is definitely a top tier team. I'm not going to say number, but
that's fine. They are one of the best teams in all of Major League Soccer. The only thing that I just want to finish up with, right, is like, I think a lot of my only question marks are going to be the fact of, like, you know, how long does it take for Denke to adapt to MLS play? How long does it take for even like Lucas Engel, right? Like, he looked pretty good in Champions Cup last night. He had an assist. But like, you know, how long is it going to take for him to adapt? Yes, he's coming in mid-season, so he's fit, but still, whatever. The thing that I like is that Evander, he doesn't need to adapt to MLS. He knows he knows it, and he was an MVP finalist last year, and he has a better striker in front of him and a better team around him. He'll probably be better in 2025. Luca Orellano, if things with his contract get worked out, I know he didn't travel with the team yesterday, so there's some question marks there still. If he gets his stuff figured out and he's on the field, this team's only getting elevated. And Pavel Buka, who had a brace last night and an absolute banger of a first goal, if people want to go watch that, he is now entering his second season in MLS, and he was a fringe international talent. Now he's coming in fully adapted. If he can elevate the team from the central midfield position, again, this team's only getting better, and that's just what this feels like. So Cincinnati was great 2 years ago. I think good last year. I think this is a team that can elevate back to great this year.
Yeah, I mean, again, it's another team that you can literally mention every player on the team, and probably a few reserve players on the team that are just absolute studs, and 99% of MLS teams would take. So, like, I guess the only downside is that there's just some stacked teams in the East right now, them being one of them, though. Like, I think they're right in that group. I think if Messi wasn't in the league, Evander would probably be the odds-on favorite for MVP this year.
I would, yes, I would safely
assume. Genuinely, he might win it anyway.
It's fair. It's 100% fair. All right, let's move to another C city in MLS. That was a really shitty transition. Charlotte FC, who has Dean
Chicago? I'm just kidding.
You guys get the nice shit end of the stick here today. Charlotte FC, Dean Smith comes in as his second season as manager. Not a ton on the out. Again, maybe more quality than we're talking anything else. But Karol Swiderski gone for a roughly $2 million deal to Greece. Hamady Diop gone. Joao Pedro loaned out, and Jiri Uranen is also on the out. This team has brought in a lot of talent outside of some of the re-signings of an Andrew Privet or a Patrick Ajiman, right? This team was able to bring back Pep Biel on a loan, not on a DP deal, which he was on last year. This team was able to bring in Eric Williamson from the Portland Timbers, and then obviously the biggest splash of the offseason for them, bringing in Wilfred Zaha on a year loan DP deal. He is going to be the absolute star of this team, and everything we talked about, Jason, in the playoffs last year, that this team just doesn't have an offensive guy to rely upon or even to help out Patrick Ajiman. Pep Biel was too busy getting red cards in the playoffs. Wilfred Zaha is expected to be that guy in Charlotte. Do you think Wilfred Zaha is going to be the starlet that Charlotte needs in 2025?
Yeah. I mean, I think the whole team improved.
Yeah.
And we're talking, if not the number 2 defensive team in the league in terms of best. Maybe you could put Cincinnati in that group of 3 with Seattle now that when healthy.
Yeah.
But, I mean, we're talking one of the best defensive teams in the league. You're bringing in a bit of a better attack, I think. I think the Swiderski, whether, I'm not going to say he was super unsuccessful. I personally think it just didn't work out, right? It's just one of those things where it didn't work out.
Swiderski got so fucked over with the 3 managers in 3 years, and he wants to go back to Europe because he doesn't have the buy-in from the club. But he's still the club's all-time leading goal scorer after his time there. That's a success.
Well, I mean, he's been there longer this whole time. But.
Whatever.
I do really like Patrick Ajiman kind of taking the next step here. I don't know. We've talked about Charlotte a lot, I feel like, in the last few weeks, but so I don't want to repeat myself too much. I do really like this team, though. I think it's another team. Dude, the East is just stacked. This is another one of those teams where it's if Miami wasn't in the same conference, if Atlanta and Cincinnati weren't also there, but I do think they're still in this group. Even Columbus is probably in that group. It's those 5 teams, in my opinion, and then there's a pretty big drop off to 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. But it's still a really, really strong team, and it's gonna Christian Kalina is still arguably the best goalie in the league, right?
Goalkeeper of the year, yeah.
So they're gonna be tough to score on, and they're gonna be better at scoring goals. And I think Wilfred Zaha, I guess to answer your question, is an upgrade. So I personally have always loved Wilfred Zaha from his Crystal Palace days, and I've watched quite a lot of him play. I really like it. I really like him. So I think he's only going to make the team better. Anyways, I don't really have much to add. I like Eric Williamson, friend of the pod.
I will just say this. You are returning, in my eyes, the league's best defense, the league's best starting back line in all of MLS last year. Ashley Westwood, who I think, central midfielders don't always get the love in the best 11 conversation. I think he was arguably up there with the Cole Bassetts of the world and kind of that 8 position. You bring in Eric Williamson, who's going to be an immediate starter when he's healthy into this lineup. And then, the attack was the issue. Was Liel Abada ready to be the star DP on this roster? I don't know, but now he doesn't have to be. Wilfred Zaha's there. Pep Biel, who's an experienced 10, can be there as the second or third option. Patrick Agyemang is elevating his game. And then you have Leo Labata, who, if on his day, he is your third best option. If on his day, he's the second best option, you know what? Like, he should get better. Curran Vargas is there. I like this team so much. I'm a big Charlotte fan. A little hint at what maybe where I have them in the placements. Jason, let's get to the teams that we're probably going to talk, no offense to them, a little bit less about.
I mean, the truth is, like, when we talk long on teams, it's because there's so many players that need to be mentioned. Like, exactly. Like a Charlotte, or like the teams we've spent longer on, or there's just enough players on those rosters that deserve to get a shout that, like, you know, some of these lower teams that finish lower and don't.
We will talk about one of these teams, I think, not pretty long, but longer. But let's go to CF Montreal. Laurent Courtois coming in his second season as manager of the club. I mean, this is just classic Montreal. We're going to find young pieces from around MLS that need to get starting minutes for development, and we're going to bring them in, and we're going to do it, right? They brought in Jalen Neal. They brought in Brandon Craig. They brought in Luca Petrasso, Dante Sealy. They brought in Caden Clark last year and Jaquil Marcel-Ruddy last year. Some players on the out, though, just to notice. Joaquin Sosa, Victor Wanyama, who really wasn't on the team, Robert Thorkelson, Josef Martinez, Lassie Lapalainen, Raheem Edwards, right? Outside of all the young players that I just named, they also brought in a U22 initiative winger in, I'm going to go, Hanadi Saichuk. And then they also brought in, New England Revolution DP striker last year, and he will be the lone DP on this roster this year. They always have one, is Giacomo Vrioni. Jason, I mean, is it bad that I'm kind of excited about this team? Like, I think they're going to be they're either going to be worse than the league, or this team's going to be so
No, they're not going to be worse than the league. I don't know. I actually disagree. I think they're right in the middle. I think they're kind of like one of those teams that I really like their starting 11. I think there's a lot of talent on it in many areas. It's funny because when you were talking about the players, Rudolph, the red-nosed reindeer.
Yeah.
You know how that's like the island of misfit toys?
Yeah. Oh, this is it. This is
the team. This is the island of misfit toys a bit. But they're good, like they're good players. Caden Clark has shown a lot of talent over the years. I think a lot of us as US fans would have liked to see kind of more. But it's getting there, and he's still young. Veroni, like, I don't know what happened.
He had double-digit goals last year. To be
fair.
Yeah,
and I think that the whole New England experience exploded. So maybe he needs a year to get back into it in a new city. I think he'll be good. Fabian Herbers is arguably one of my favorite Chicago Fire players over the last 4 years.
Friend of the pod, by the way, but
awesome guy. Piet, I like. I don't know. There's talent in this team. Jalen Neal, I think, is a decent signing.
Joe Waterman, I think, is a stud center back on a not so great team year after year.
But you're right. Like, this is another. It's just that team that they're content kind of being competitive and not great, right? Like, I don't know if they're going to spend the money to be great. I don't know if they ever want to, but
yeah,
it seems to me like they're content sitting on that playoff line and playing spoiler, I guess, to teams. I don't know.
There is a world where Jalen Neal, George Campbell, and Joel Waterman are like the best three center backs in all of MLS next year, and like a back three. Jaquil Marcel-Ruddy, Caden Clark, and Bryce Duke are just filthy in the attack, and Giacomo Vrioni is just sitting there like just waiting on any opportunity he can to just tap one in the back of the net.
Okay, but I mean, if you look at last season, they had 48 goals and 64 goals.
And I think the team
it was one of the worst goal differentials it is the worst goal differential for a playoff team last season.
Sure.
Actually, it is the only negative. Well, Atlanta technically was negative.
Sure. I'm just saying, I think the team got better. I think there's a lot of young talent that – see, where the Red Bulls is like they have a good veteran core, and if the young talent it hits, it only elevates them. I think Montreal needs the young talent to hit to be good. So
I don't think they're in the same conversation.
No. I was just comparing it for people.
Maybe if Montreal can get their own Emil Forsberg.
maybe. Right,
but I don't think they're willing to do that. It doesn't seem like it, at least.
DC United, Troy Lesesne coming in his second season as manager of this club. They have the reigning MLS Golden Boot winner in Christian Benteke. But really quick on the players out, Matthias Klick gone in a weird, bad deal. Matai Akambone sold to Bournemouth. Ted DiPietro sold inside of MLS to the Rapids. Just a laundry list of Tyler Miller, Chris McVeigh, Christian Dahome, Alex Bono, and a few other names gone from this team. On the in, this team did bring in Brandon Servania, Kai Rowells over from Scotland, Randall Leal via free agency, Kim Jun-hung over from South Korea, which is a very interesting story. We don't always see a young goalkeeper coming into MLS at that profile. Lucas McNaughton, Joao Peglo, Jose Kojima, and a whole laundry list of other, I think, kind of very important key depth pieces for this team. DC is maybe that team outside of Orlando in the East that I'm just like, I don't know how I feel. Like, this could be great. I'm not going to lie.
I mean, I feel like you just talk about how Montreal similarly is like riding that playoff line. It's also DC, but like DC is in a very strange spot because Benteke elevates the attack so much.
That's the
like
thing.
Scores so many goals that like they're never not out of a game because he'll just like pull a goal out of nowhere. And I think the conversation is Benteke, right? Like, can he keep doing that? If he can, they're going to be right on that play-in game line, maybe a little below. But if he can't, it could arguably one of the worst teams in MLS. In my opinion.
Think this team is going to be pretty good. I'm not going to say like great or solid. I think this team's going to be pretty good on the defensive end of things. I like some of the players brought in. I
mean, they need a better defense.
I think maybe that's what the focus was for this offseason. I think Kim Jun-hung is actually going to be a pretty good goalkeeper if he's the starting spot. And if it's not, and it's Luis Barraza, I like Luis Barraza as well. And I like what the central midfield looks like. I personally just think if this team can be stout defensively or just much improved defensively coming from last year, and whoever it is in the attack can just ping a ball over to Christian Benteke in the air, and he puts up anywhere close to what he did last year, I think this team's in the playoffs.
I just kind of feel like they're in the same spot, maybe in a little bit high. Like maybe they're in the playing game to get into the playoffs. I don't know if I'm like super confident in them getting a for sure playoff spot, I guess. Like to me, their best case scenario is probably 7th, which is a playoff game, like a for sure playoff game. But I think that's best case scenario. I think it's well more likely they're 8, 9, 10, or even 11.
I think that's fair. I personally just feel like if DC ends this year and you see some positive glimpses of some things, they make the playoffs, they make the playing game, you see some development from some guys. Heading into year 3 of Troy Lesesne, I'm feeling very excited about DC. But I think this year is almost like, let's like set the bar, let's elevate slightly, let's make sure we're a playoff team. And then next year, like we'll make a few more signings. You get out of that Matthias Klick weird DP thing, and then you maybe move to try to be at the topper part of the Eastern Conference next year. But 2025 seems to be like, let's ride it out. 2026 is our year. That's what it feels like to me.
Yeah, I don't know. I think this team will be like, again, it's just going to be competitive. Team, but it's like the East is tough, man. The East is, I don't want to like compare conferences because people get super weird about that sometimes, but the East is tough as hell. Like there's some crazy good teams and some very good middle teams. Like we always say like you should be able to make the playoffs in a league that sends 8 teams to the play, like what, more than 50% of the conference. But this year in the East, it's not as easy.
I agree, and I think a team that will probably be at the bottom of the East is Toronto FC. Robin Fraser, year
Pass.
one
I'm just
as
kidding.
manager. I mean, look, I'm not. I don't have.
I mean, it's the same conversation. Just go ahead. Just go.
That's fine. Players out: Prince Owusu, Thiago Andrade, who never played for the club, but whatever. They made some money off an expansion draft trade. Brandon Servania, Greg Ranjit Singh, Shane O'Neill. Right. The players in. I like some of the players in. Theo Corbineau, Canadian international winger, coming in. They re-signed a bunch of dudes, and then obviously I think their big splash was their new striker, the Norway international. I just want to pull it up so I have it. Norway international Ola Brynhildsen from Midtjylland. He's going to be on loan for the 2024 season. He has, he has almost 260 games played at 25 years old. He has over 100 goal contributions to his name. He seems like a pretty good player for all intents and purposes of what I think the rest of this Toronto conversation is going to be about. But, some decent pieces coming in, but not enough, in my opinion, to elevate this team to the playoff level. And you still have, there's two players specifically, but you still have the anchor of Lorenzo Insigne on this team. That's going to eat up salary space, eat up a DP spot, and obviously eat up not production on the field.
And eat up just like headaches.
Exactly, right? So I think, look, this is just
Insigne leads the league in headaches, man.
His ex-headaches.
And this is a league with Lucho and Evander, who both were like, I don't want to play for my team anymore.
I will just say this about Toronto, and I have nothing else to say. If you can figure out the Insigne situation, and again, similar to DC, by the end of the year, you're even in a playoff battle. You don't even need to make the playoffs in my brain. If you're in a playoff battle and there are some positive sparks from Corbineau, from this new Norwegian striker, from whoever we want to talk about, and maybe some young pieces step up, then okay, 2026, let's talk about taking another step forward under Robin Fraser. I just don't know if they even have that.
I think what they did last year was very impressive under what was their coach, the Canadian?
John Herdman.
Yeah, John Herdman. Like, super impressive where they ended up finishing. Also, a little bit of luck because their goal differential was abysmal. But I don't think they can do that again, and I think it's going to be tough. Like, I think what John Herdman got out of this players, and then to lose that, and obviously there's some stuff there in the background. But to lose him as a coach and have to switch again hurts quite a bit. I think the reason that it kind of like I don't love talking about TFC is just simply because it's been the Insigne conversation for like 3 years now.
That's all it is. Yeah.
And it gets so old. And it's like, dude, just leave or start playing better. Like, it's simple, man. It's like, why do you have to be like this? But
and if you're the Toronto front office, why don't you just buy out his contract?
If you're the Toronto fans, like, it's just tough. Like, it's the same conversation every year, and it doesn't, like, I have no reason to believe it's going to get better this year, just magically. I think what they were able to do last year was great, but I just don't see that happening again. I like some of the players on this team, so it kind of sucks to see. Like, I think both of us are huge Sean Johnson fans, always will be. Yeah. But it is kind of just what it is. I do like the Norwegian striker they bring in. Hopefully, if they have a really bad season, he can be a bright spot. And even if he isn't, like, I just feel like it's going to be tough to judge his quality on a year where there's potentially more unrest or pain in this team. So
I'm not silent because I don't disagree. I'm just silent because I just have nothing more to say about
there's it. Just I mean, there's not it's a bummer because, like, how far has this team fallen?
Yeah. All right. Let's talk about a team that might also be falling far. The Philadelphia Union. Bradley Carnell coming in his first season, replacing the legend of Jim Curtin in what he was the last decade in the Philadelphia area, which is probably going to be something held against Bradley Carnell, probably unfairly, but here we are. The Philadelphia Union, they lost this offseason the likes of Jack Elliott, Sam Adiner, and Leon Flack, and then obviously the big inter-MLS trade of Jack McGlynn. on the replacement. This team did spend some money this offseason, not like we see with other MLS clubs, but for the Union, they spent some money. Bruno Damiani coming in as a new DP striker that we haven't talked about, but we will, I'm sure, talk about here. Jovan Lukic coming in the midfield. Ian Glavinovic coming in at center back from South America, re-signing Olivier Mbaizo, Mikel Ure, and Alejandro Bedoya, all in that. And then obviously what the Philadelphia Union do, the youth movement, signing a bunch of homegrowns in between all of that. Jason, I want to start the conversation with Damiani really quick, though. The new DP striker coming in on a club record, roughly $3 million deal, does have one cap for Uruguay. He has a pretty successful season down in Uruguay the last season and a half. I'm not talking like this is a dude that's going to break out onto the scene, whatever, but he is a club record signing, and he could be a piece that I feel like maybe elevates this team out of some dire hopes that I don't really, or some of the dire hopes that I do have, not dire hopes, whatever, out of some negative feelings that I have about this team.
Yeah, I mean, I think I personally have some negative feelings as well about this team. I honestly, like, with that signing, it kind of confuses me. Like, you're going to put all that money there, and then, I don't know, I feel like the Jack McGlynn leaving is weird. It doesn't line up with what I feel like I want them to be doing, but I think that's probably not a hot take.
Yeah, I think the Union fans agree with you too.
But I mean, like you said, can this team find some diamonds in the homegrowns like they've been able to do for many years? If any team's going to do it, this is one of the teams I would trust to do it. It's going to be tough though. Like at some point you have to. It's funny because like at some point you have to spend money, and they kind of did, but I don't feel like they did so in a way that makes them really great. Like I do like some of their players. I even like Ty Baribo, Mikel Ure, Daniel Gazdag. Like there's players on this team that are solid. Glesnes. They still have Kai Wagner, who like somehow is still there. I don't know. The team, like I truly believe if they lose Andre Blake again for an extended period of time, maybe the worst team in the conference. It's one of those teams that relies too heavily on Andre Blake being Andre Blake, which when he's in, he's absolutely phenomenal. And another reason why towards the end of last season they made that push, and I was pretty confident they were going to make it into the playoffs. They ended up falling short, but like when Andre Blake is in, the defense is just so much better. It's such a different look of a team. Which is crazy because I think it's like maybe the only team you could say that their goalkeeper alone is just like this massive boost to the entire team's energy. Like they just look like a completely different team. But yeah, I mean, I think this team has talent. It's just dispersed too much and it's not consistent.
It's not the fact that I don't think this team has talent. I'm just worried about the direction that talent's going. Andre Blake, he's been a little injury prone the last 2 years. He's not getting any younger. Jakob Glesnes went from potential best 11 center back to last year. He was just not good. Like just straight up not good. And the other three center backs on the senior roster right now are all younger than the age of 22. That's typically also not great. Kai Wagner, sure, he's there and he's going to, produce offensively and defensively from the left side. And I'd probably say the same thing with Olivier Mbaizo and Nathan.
They're asking all those defenders to do a lot more this year too.
100%. And you're asking Donley Jean-Jacques, the D-mid that they brought in the summer last year, who I actually like. I think he's a pretty young, talented defensive midfielder, and I think he's not going to be what Jose Martinez was, but he's going to be a very good six, I think. I like him a lot. But you're asking him to carry a big weight defensively, probably the same thing with Jesus Bueno, and it's just like, I don't know. It just said a lot of positives about a lot of players, but I don't think the combination of Gazdag, Ure, and Damiani or Baribo or whoever it's going to be has enough to be a good offensive team in 2025, mixed with, I think, the pressure that's going to be put on the central midfield, and then a lot of just holes on that back line, especially in central defense, where I think the Union are going to be successful in 2025. Could this be successful in 2026? Could Kevin Sullivan get 1,000 minutes this year, and then in 2026 he's playing 2,500 minutes and he's the best 10 in the league? Sure. And that's probably what the Union front office are hoping, is that Kevin Sullivan's one of the best players in 2 years' time. But it's the youth movement for Philly, and then they're spending every other year, and that's just where it is. So that's my Philly take. Are you good with Philly?
I'm good with Philly. Sorry, Philly fans, for not spending too much time on you, but
I mean, we gave them.
They know where they're at.
Yes. Nashville SC. So Nashville coming in with the first full season of BJ Callahan. He was obviously there for half a year. Major turnover for this club. They have moved on from Elliot Panico, Randall Leal, Shaq Moore, Sean Davis, Lucas McNaughton, Osmar Sejdic, Annabelle Godoy, Taha Nunga, Forrester Ajango, Drew Yearwood, and Brent Coleman, all who played big minutes for them last year.
Basically named 90% of their team.
I mean, yeah, but on the return, they did spend a good amount of money and brought in some talent in Edvard Tagsteth, Gaston Brugman, Andy Nahar. They brought in Jason Palacios, Matthew Corcoran, who is a big talent from USL that I love, and then Ahmed Qasim, who came into the fold in the last few days or so. Jason, I'm going to hold off on my comments here because next Tuesday I have an interview dropping with Ben Wright, where him and I dive deep into Nashville. So I'm going to let you take the Nashville take, whatever you think it is.
I mean, to me, this Nashville team just was not good last year in any way, which, good for them for realizing that and making a whole bunch of changes. It's going to be tough because when you do make a whole bunch of changes, it takes a while for those changes to actually usually make a huge impact or make an impact together. I think the Hani Mukhtar still being here and really, I don't know, is he living off 3 years ago when he was an MVP? Was it 3? I don't even know. But
I will just defend Hani in the sense of he had to be the only option for the team, and now maybe there's a little bit more on the offense.
Maybe. I mean, they bring in Sam Surridge, though, and that didn't live up to what it was supposed to. I do agree. I'm not trying to hate on Hani Mukhtar, but it's not been what it was. And also, defensively, this team hasn't been, their whole thing was we're going to be so solid defensively and we're going to win 1-0 or 2-1 or whatever. It worked for a season and a half, maybe 2 years. I don't know.
2-3 years, and then
where they were good, but they were never. There was 1 year where they were pretty great, but I
think that was the formula that kept them in the conversation. But then I think it just got stale.
Yeah, I mean, it totally got stale. I think the team, like you said, they bring in a lot of players. They bring in players who should be able to help in the attack, which a lot of new center mids, a lot of new wingers, and you're now hopefully asking Hani Mukhtar to fall back into his more familiar role where he's not carrying 10 other guys on his shoulders.
Hani was on a tear at the end of last year, the last 4 weeks of the season. I think he almost maybe acclimated under BJ Callahan a bit. I think I'm not saying you're going to see MVP level Hani, but I think you could see more moments of MVP level Hani in 2025.
Yeah, I mean, I think Walker Zimmerman still has a bunch of years left in him as well, being a top-tier defender in the league. I think Joe Willis is still a good goalie, even though, he's – I don't know. I think this team is still – it's just another – I don't know. We're getting towards the teams that I'm just not that high on, personally. I think there's not a huge amount to say, but I like where they're going. I think maybe this is another team that's kind of a year away.
I agree.
Moves make sense and work out this year, I think there's potential to see them kind of hit their stride the following year. But
I think 2026, honestly, is going to be a big year for Nashville. If, again, things take that, doesn't need to be a giant step forward, but if things take that small step forward in 2025. let's move to New England, Jason, where I don't feel the vibe super high from you either. But let's see the New England Revolution. Caleb,
you mean like, oh, let's just sign a bunch of players from all over the world?
You replace more than half the roster. That's literally what the New England Revolution did.
In some ways, actually, that makes my vibe better because they had a negative 37 goal differential. That was tied with San Jose. So
I will go through some of the big ones here. Caleb Porter coming in as a second season as manager of the Revs. On the out, Xavier Arriaga, Dylan Barrero, Nacho Heel, Jonathan Mensah, Nick Lima, Tim Parker, Bobby Wood, Mark Anthony Kay, Dave Romney, Esmir Bahar. He's gone to Esmir went to PSG. I don't need to try to say his last name anymore. That's just where things are at with that. Emma Boateng and Giacomo Vrioni. On the in, Brandon Bai re-signed 2 new center backs in Mamadou Fofana and Brian Ceballos, Jackson Ewell, Leo Campagna, some new goalkeepers, Ignatius Ganago at striker, and U22 initiative right back, and Ilya Feingold. Sorry. So there's a lot. The Revs literally replaced more than half of their roster this year, and I don't know. I like the tactic in that the team needed to get better, but I don't know if replacing more than half your roster with guys who don't know the league, don't know the continent, all of that is going to win you games in 2025.
I kind of agree, kind of disagree.
That's
I think
fine.
it was totally necessary, and I think like some of what plagued them a few years ago with the whole Bruce Arena situation, like it felt to me like it kind of was a dark cloud over this team, even going into last year. And I'm glad Caleb Porter's been successful in MLS, and I was very high on this team last year. I think you're actually going to be surprised. I'm a little higher on this team than I think maybe you think I am. Simply, like I was high on this team last year, and they obviously had one of the worst seasons I think you could imagine. I like the fact that Caleb Porter said, you know what, I'm going to go and make a ton of changes, a ton of very necessary changes
Guys,
around Carles Hill, who we've seen be in the MVP conversation and at that level in MLS.
Yes.
And I think I'm hoping maybe he was involved with some of those moves. I don't know. But I think, like I said, Caleb Porter's been successful, and I don't see why this team can't be successful. Like you said, and I guess it's a similar conversation with Nashville where it's a lot of change and how quickly can that work. But maybe I'm a little more faithful in Caleb Porter figuring it out than BJ Callahan. And that's nothing to say about BJ. He just hasn't. I think the resume of Caleb Porter is a little bit easier to fall back on.
Yeah.
Which is why I'm really glad that he's still there, because I think I was maybe one of the only people last season saying, this is horrible, but firing Caleb Porter, in my opinion, was going to be a mistake. And I honestly think it would be a mistake if they do it this year. And I know a lot of people will probably disagree with me, including maybe you, but I think it's going to be a mistake to say, okay, now you've made all your changes. This is the first year that I would actually say this is his team.
Yeah.
And I think if this is his team, then throw away last year. Pretend it didn't happen because it was so bad and it wasn't his team. It wasn't what he wanted, I'm assuming, to play.
It was a lot of Bruce's guys last year.
And a lot of guys who were part of that, I don't know what happened. No one really does, but we're part of the whole situation. And my point is, I would be willing, if I was in charge of this team, to at least give Caleb Porter 2 years from here. Just maybe in 2026, if it's horrible or really bad in the beginning, then you start to think about making a change. But if he gets fired this year, if it's not a great year, I'm going to be kind of disappointed because you're just resetting your clock, I guess, which I've seen too many MLS teams do. And I think it is a plague on the bottom tier of MLS, where it's just the first route front offices go to. And in my opinion, bad front offices go to is let's get rid of the coach and try and do it again. But I think in terms of soccer in general and MLS specifically is coaching needs time to develop what they want to develop. It's not like you can just bring in a coach and have all the players immediately buy in. There's so many different styles and so many different, whether it's formation, whether it's where they're playing certain players, that I think you need consistency. And I think out of any team, this team needs consistency, maybe the most in all of MLS, to get back on track.
I think if you hire Caleb Porter after Bruce Arena, which is obviously what this team did, I think that's what they're aiming for, right? Like that's what it feels like. And I'm not saying I necessarily agree or disagree with your take, but I think if you're going to have Caleb Porter be the leader of this team and you're allowing him to overhaul more than half of the roster, I think you need to give them at least 2026. Like, let's see, okay, fine, this is your team, this is your guys, right? Like we gave you all this money, freedom to switch it all over. Now let's see what you do in 2 years, this year and next year with this team. And I think that's fair. I do like a lot of the talent on this team. Peyton Miller, I think, will be a high-end left back by the time 2020.
I barely even talked about any of the players.
And that's why I'm just going to kind of roll through some of the players I like here. I like Peyton Miller. I like Brandon Bai, still as an MLS veteran. Luca Langoni, the U22 signing, the record-breaking U22 signing from last summer. I think you have half a season in MLS now. He's going to take a step forward. I like it. Campagna, borderline Ecuador international. Obviously, now he's getting the reins at striker that he didn't get at Miami. You still have Carlos Hill. I really like Alhassan Youssef. He was a really good D mid last year. I think he even can kind of push forward into the attack a little bit too. I like the profile of players on this roster. I just think for me, it's not 2025. I think for me, let's get these guys acclimated 2026. I think this team could be a super, like, I'm not even talking like Nashville. Okay, let's get them acclimated and let's see if we can make it be a mid-tier playoff team in 2026. I think this is New England. Let's get these guys acclimated and we can be a high-end playoff team in 2026.
Yeah, I agree. And I also think that, I don't know. Like, I just think the top of the East is like just a different level, which is actually like 5 teams at this point. But I think this season specifically, I'm looking for this team to show improvements too, though. Like, as much as I said, let Caleb Porter have his time to gel and create what he wants, and I totally think that's still true. I don't want this season to start off and finish off in anywhere near a similar way as last season. Like, I do think improvement is 100% necessary because the bar is very low, right? And if, like, to me, this team, if they can kind of figure it out, is not that far behind. And it's not like the other teams I'm going to mention are that great, but like, it's not that far behind, like the DCs, the Montreals, even Philly. I mean,
if they're even behind them at this point.
Well, yeah, and that's a good point. But I mean, where I have them finishing will be more interesting. But yeah, I do think that this team can make a push to be above some of these teams we've mentioned towards the end here, where it's like, what are we seeing?
All right, let's finish up with a team that I'm pretty high on. I think you're pretty high on too. And Jason, I'm going to just let you go since you let me go New York City. But the Chicago Fire, obviously, Greg Berhalter new manager, a lot of players on the out underneath Greg. Gaston Jimenez, Rafael Schijos, Fabian Herbers, Wyatt Omsberg, Salquist, Federico Navarro, Soquet, all those guys gone, right? On the in is Jonathan Bamba as a brand new star to this team, Philip Zinkernackle. You have Sam Rogers, Jack Elliott, which was probably one of the stars of MLS free agency, a new U22 right back in Leonardo Barroso. Jason, what is the status right now in your brain, maybe in all of Chicago, of the Fire?
It's funny, man. I get so excited about this team every single year, but this year it feels different, and I will tell you why. Out of all those names you mentioned, including Greg Berhalter, each one of them could have been the best signing of the winter. I always want to say summer because it just feels like an appropriate offseason. But either one of those could have been the biggest signing of the offseason for this team. And they probably made like 5 biggest signings of the offseason for them specifically. And getting off of certain contracts like the Gaston Jimenez contract is another move that could be seen as one of the best moves they've made this offseason.
Yeah,
so
right.
I think
if you just signed Greg and did that, honestly, like, good offseason.
Yeah, so I think the point here is there's a lot of moves to kind of talk about if we really wanted to spend a long time on them, which I don't think we do. But I think the fact that Greg Berhalter came in, and we know the team, we know that they're willing to spend. They've been willing to spend for years. While their spending has not translated to on-field success, which, they haven't made the playoffs in like a decade, except whatever. I'm just gonna stick with it.
Once in the last decade.
Yeah, like they haven't won a trophy in 15
Forever.
years or 20 years at this point. And it's a bummer because it is a top market, one of the top markets in MLS. I would say, I don't know, I know I'm biased, but
no, it is. It's a top market in U.S. sports and in MLS. 100%.
I think people who weren't watching or that close to the Fire last season, which totally fine with, like they were shit.
Get it.
I think they might be further down on Hugo Kuipers than people like me or Chicago fans who actually watched him every week, where he was not well serviced and
he should this year.
Yeah, it wasn't great. I mean, I think you could also argue that Shaqiri out last year is part of this year's good moves.
Fair.
But like Hugo Kuipers, I'm looking to have a much better season, and I don't even think he had that bad of a season given what we were dealing with last season. I think Jonathan Bamba coming in is a huge move. I personally think they made the right choice here in terms of who to bring in as winger. I've always been a fan of Hale Solis on the wing. There's more depth on the wings than I think we've ever had. I think Chris Mueller and Zinker Nagel are both solid, amazing depth pieces in this team that we haven't really had. You still have Brian Gutierrez, and I think maybe that's the one question is, can Brian Gutierrez take that next step? I'm hoping Greg saw something where he's like, yeah, he's going to, because he's going to be asked to do a decent amount. He's going to be asked to kind of lead that midfield. And you still have Kellen Acosta, who's as experienced as it gets. So it's not like it's all on Gutierrez, but I think Gutierrez is going to be asked to create a lot. And whether they bring in a DP in the summer at that position, it remains to be seen. I don't know.
I think they bring in a DP. I don't know if it's at the 10. It also depends on if Gutierrez is still here in the summer, but yes.
And then you look at the defense, like you still have a very good young goalkeeper in Chris Brady. He's going to be good again. Like we've seen it now for a few years. He's good. Like I don't think he needs to prove it to anyone, at least in MLS. I've always loved Carlos Terán. So him getting those more minutes is to me a good thing. Jack Elliott, like you said, one of the stars of the free agency, probably getting a guy that Greg knows very well, can only be positive. And then you have
11 defender of the year too.
Yeah. So I don't know, like another roster that was kind of overhauled a decent amount, but they kept a core of the players that actually mattered, I guess, or didn't have debilitating contracts. So I guess I'd probably just talk for quite a while, but
no,
I'm very high on the team. I think in terms of going into this year versus other years that I know I've been high on, and people can look at and say, it didn't work that year and you really liked it then. Well, it's different. Okay. And that's the only thing, like I can only say it's different because it is, and it feels different, but I don't know if that makes sense.
I'm going to leave it at that because one, time, but two, I don't necessarily disagree with you. I think Jonathan Bamba's best 11 quality. I think Brian Gutierrez and Chris Brady could take massive steps forward. I just trust a Greg Berhalter product in MLS, and I think the Fire are going to be good. And with that, Jason, let's go into all of our predictions.
Oh, man, that was fun. That was fun. We just predicted, or we just previewed every single team in MLS over 3 weeks. So.
That is a round of applause for us, first of all. But let's go into it, Jason. We have to go through our Eastern predictions, our our award winners, and then our trophy winners. So let's do it. Let's just go back and forth. Do it quick and get out of here for everyone's sake. But Eastern Conference, 15th, Toronto FC. Who do you have?
Toronto FC. Yep.
Boom. 14th.
Wait, are we not doing it how we normally do it?
Oh, yeah, sorry. I apologize. You can go, 14th.
14th, Philadelphia Union for me.
I have Nashville SC. In 13th, I have DC United.
I have Nashville in 13th. And I have DC United in 12th.
I have the Philadelphia Union in 12th. So we have the same teams 12 through 15. Pretty good.
Yeah.
Even more, because I have 11. I have New England.
I think this conference was actually a little bit closer than
the West.
The West, maybe. I don't know. Sorry, which one am I on?
11, I have New England.
I have Montreal in 11.
I
have New England, so I am pretty high on them in 10th. Higher than I think most people would think.
I have Montreal in 10th. So, yeah, I mean, look, I'll save it one more, but I have something to say after our 9. But in 9th, I have New York City FC.
I also have – oh, am I supposed to go?
Yeah. We do this every year.
I know, and I'm still – it's been a long time, man. I said after an hour. We're at an hour 40.
We both have New York City FC in 9th.
I have the Fire in 8th.
Just really quick, we have the same teams, 9 – not the same – spots, but we have the same exact grouping of teams 9 through 15. So just want to point that out there.
So our outside the playoffs and our inside the playoffs are essentially the same.
Yes. Yeah. So you said you had the Fire in 8th. I have Orlando City in 8th, and I have the Fire in 7th.
Oh, please, for the love of God, that would be the best thing ever. I have the Red Bulls in 7th and Orlando in 6th.
I have the Red Bulls in 6th and the Columbus Crew in 5th.
I have Columbus in 5th as well, and I have Charlotte in 4th.
I have Atlanta United in 4th and Charlotte in 3rd.
And then I have Cincinnati in 3rd, and then I have Atlanta United finishing 2nd.
And then you have Inter Miami finishing 1st, where I have Charlotte in 3rd, Cincinnati in 2nd, and Inter Miami finishing.
Yeah, so we both have Inter Miami winning the conference.
And we can go into that and talk about our trophy. Jason, who do you have winning the Supporter Shield? Because it's between Inter Miami and the Seattle Sounders for both of us.
Yeah, I have Miami winning the Supporter Shield. I think they just get it done again.
So do I. I have Miami getting it. I don't know if they break a points record, but I think they get it.
I do think that's the only one we were agreement on.
Yes.
So,
Canadian Championship, I have my mighty high CF Montreal.
I'm running it back with my boys, man. I'm running it back with Vancouver. They're going to do it again. They're just running this shit every single year.
Four-time back-to-back champions. U.S. Open Cup, I have Minnesota United.
A great pick, to be fair to you. It was in my cap, whatever.
There's 3 teams that I had.
Yeah, I did too, and I'm sure they were the same 3. And I have Charlotte winning the U.S. Open Cup.
Leagues Cup, I have the Seattle Sounders winning.
I have Atlanta United winning.
CONCACAF Champions Cup, I have Inter Miami taking that.
I have FC Cincinnati. Maybe a rare poll? I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, it can happen 100%. I think there's
I think there's a route for a very strong defense with firepower in the attack to win that tournament.
Yeah, I mean, 100%.
Which is that team to a T.
And I literally went through the bracket and made my picks, and then that's how I got down to Inter Miami. But the biggest pick of the offseason, Jason, who is your MLS Cup champions in 2025?
My MLS Cup champions are the Seattle Sounders.
I have LAFC. I'm also maybe banking on Griezmann showing up, but we will see. Jason, let's run down our award winners and get out of here. Who is your manager, your coach of the year?
This one, so sorry, I'm taking a little bit longer on these, but this one,
you can justify your picks. That's totally.
Well, the thing is, I really just want to give an honorable mention to Dean Smith because I know that this award doesn't work like I think it should because I picked. So first of all, to the listeners, I picked Brian Schmetzer to win Coach of the Year simply because I think they're going to win the Western Conference, which is a big deal. And I think typically the team that wins their conference, it's one of those teams that gets Coach of the Year, which is a shame because I think what Dean Smith's going to do this year is going to be very impressive, and he should actually be the rightful winner.
Okay. That's fair. That's fine. I'm going Javier Mascherano. Maybe not the fan pick here, but I have Miami winning Champions Cup, and I have them winning the Supporter Shield. And I think if they do that, Mascherano's getting Coach of the Year. So I kind of had to go with that.
I mean, if they win, so like that's the same thing with me. Like if you win, it was between who we picked to win the conferences, which were actually the same teams in both conferences. But
exactly, Schmetzer would have been my number 2. Just to be honest. Young Player of the Year, which is a player younger than the age of 22 for people listening. I'm going Jack McGlynn with Houston. I just think he's going to shine in their system.
Yeah. I'm going Elijah Winder with the Galaxy. I think there's a route for him to get a lot of minutes this year, and he's coming into a team that's very talented. So and he has like 100 games played at 21. So it's not like this guy's shy.
When I saw you put that name down, I was like, I like Jason going bold with it. I'm a fan.
The thing is, like, I was struggling with that one a bit because I was like, you're probably right with the McGlynn, but I really wanted Elijah Winder to get it. And also, what is it? They just lost the Nashville midfielder.
Oh yeah, Marquis Delgado gone because
not Delgado. Wait, it was not Delgado.
Sean Davis.
Sean Davis. I was like, wait a second, that's way worse. So that to me makes it feel like they saw something for Winder that he's going to get a lot of minutes.
Yeah,
and to me, like if they're good and he gets a lot of minutes, he's going to be a part of that.
Fair. Newcomer of the year, new player to Major League Soccer. Jason, you want to go first?
I have Wilfred Zaha for that pick.
Okay. I'm going Emmanuel Latte-Lath.
I don't think either of us need to justify those picks.
Nope, it makes sense. Defensive player of the year. I want to hear your justification here, but defensive player of the year, I'm going Jackson Reagan for the Seattle Sounders. Again, I think it's going to be good defense.
What, you don't think my pick is a good one?
I'm just confused.
I picked Timo Baumgartl.
Yep. Okay. New St. Louis center back. New center back to the league.
I think St. Louis is going to have a very good defense this year. And I think a top tier defense that's probably not at I do think they're going to face a lot of pressure. So I don't know. I don't know, man. I don't know to justify everything.
I just don't know if I would have picked a new center back to the league, but that's just me.
Hey. He's gonna do well, man.
Okay, goalkeeper.
It's not like I've gotten these right before.
Goalkeeper of the year, Jason.
I have Roman Celentano. Typically, I like to choose a goalkeeper that's going to face a lot of shots, and I don't think he will. But I think their defense is going to be so good that. Well, also it's in the Eastern Conference, where, like I said many times this pod, they're great teams. So
yeah, I'm going Dane St. Clair in the sense of
I love that pick.
I think Minnesota's be good. I think Minnesota.
I saw that and I was like, hell yeah, that's a great pick.
I think he'll face some shots and he'll rack up some saves. And I think Minnesota. I don't know. I
don't know. It's tough because it's like, are they going to get a lot of clean sheets? Hopefully, and then Dane St. Clair probably wins that award. I think Roman Celentano will get a lot of clean sheets.
All right, let's go to one that I don't think you and I need to justify, but MLS MVP. We had the same pick here, Lionel Messi.
Lionel Messi, yep. I think there's a couple names. Like, I really do think Evander's going to be in that conversation. Yeah. I also think Almiron might be in that conversation at the end of the season.
I also think Kelvin Yeboah could potentially be there.
Okay, yeah, we needed a Western player.
And I'm gonna go with my Golden Boot winner is Kelvin Yeboah from.
And I'm about to be as predictable as it gets with mine because I only pick Atlanta United strikers, and mine is going to be Emmanuel Latte-Lath. Hopefully that's not a curse that he's going to be gone mid-season.
Cruz Azul is going to spend $20 million on him. All right, folks, that was our Eastern Conference preview. Jason, you and I have done 2 long episodes. We had to do it, but I'm glad we did it. Proud of us. Folks, if you listened, you like it, please subscribe, give us reviews, all that fun stuff.
MLS starts this weekend.
And we will catch you guys next week with a full recap of Week 1. Jason, I'm excited to talk actual MLS soccer with you soon enough.
Super exciting.
See you guys later.